So if you've been keeping an eye on Israel's housing market lately, you're probably a little confused, right? The latest data, well, it seems to be telling two totally different stories at the same time. On one hand, it looks like things are cooling down. But on the other, the market is holding surprisingly strong. So what is actually going on here?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Is the Israeli real estate market really at a turning point? Are we just looking at a temporary blip? Or is this the start of a completely new chapter? Let's try to figure that out.
Okay, before we dive headfirst into all those contradictions, let's just zoom out for a second and get the big picture. So check this out. As of the middle of 2025, Israel's housing stock actually crossed the 3 million mark for the very first time. And it's not stopping there. It's still growing by almost 2% in just the last year alone. So you got to remember, this steady growth, it's the backdrop for everything else we're about to unpack.
All right, so to make sense of all this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the sales slowdown. Then, we'll zoom out to the housing stock itself. After that, we'll get into the real head-scratcher, the price puzzle. And finally, we'll ask, what's really driving this market?
Okay, part one, the sales slowdown. Let's start by taking the market's pulse, by looking at the actual number of transactions. This is really where that story of a cool down begins. And here's the headline number that got everyone talking. A drop of nearly 12%. That's how much total apartment sales fell in the fall of 2025 compared to just the 3 months before. I mean, that is a significant dip in activity in a really short amount of time.
So, if we dive a little deeper into that number, we're talking about almost 20,000 homes sold in that 3-month window. And yeah, most of those were secondhand properties. But the real story here, the thing you need to pay attention to, isn't just that split. It's how these two parts of the market, new homes versus secondhand, are acting completely differently. And this is where that difference becomes absolutely critical. Look at this comparison. Year over year, sales of new homes, the ones from developers, they plummeted by over 16%. But the secondhand market, it only saw a pretty modest decline. Just about 5.5%. So what does that tell you? It tells you that this market chill is hitting the new construction sector way, way harder.
Okay, so that's the short-term story on sales. Now for part two, let's pull back from those individual deals and look at the bigger picture, the total housing stock in the country.
And here we are again with this massive number, 3.02 million homes. It's just a good reminder that no matter what the short-term sales numbers are doing, the underlying reality is that this is a huge established housing market. And this really puts the long-term trend into perspective. That sales dip we just talked about, it's happening against a backdrop of just steady, powerful growth. I mean, look at this. In the last decade, the number of homes has jumped by almost 20%. That's like adding nearly 500,000 new homes. It's huge. And of course, that growth doesn't look the same everywhere. It's fascinating, really. You have what you could call vertical cities, like Bat Yam and Ashdod. They're almost 1 out of every 10 buildings is a high-rise. Then you've got the horizontal cities, like Beersheba, where it's the total opposite. Over 70% of buildings are low-rise, with just a couple of homes in them.
All right, let's put the pieces together for part three. We've got slowing sales, but the number of houses keeps going up. Now, basic Econ 101, right? Fewer buyers, more supply, prices should start to drop. But is that what's actually happening? This, my friends, is where we get to the real puzzle.
First things first, a little context is key here. Israeli housing prices have been on an absolute roller coaster. Just look at 2022, an insane surge with prices rocketing up at a 20% annual clip. And then, bam, a sharp dip into negative territory in 2023. So yeah, to say this market is no stranger to volatility would be an understatement. But after all that drama, all those peaks and valleys, look where we are now. A price change of plus 0.1%. That's it. So think about that. Sales volume drops by almost 12%, but prices, they've basically flatlined. They're not crashing. They're not even really dropping. They've just stalled. In that flat national number, it's kind of misleading because it hides a much more complex story underneath. When you drill down by region, you see a totally different picture. For example, in the Jerusalem district, prices actually went up by 1.5%. But then you look over at Haifa, and they saw a small drop. It's a great reminder that Israel doesn't have one single real estate market. It's a bunch of local ones, all with their own unique rhythm.
So this all brings us to the final, and maybe the most important part of our story. What is driving this market? I mean, why? Why are prices holding so steady when sales are clearly falling?
Let's dig into the forces at play here.
Well, it turns out there are a few really powerful forces basically propping up the market, which explains this resilience. For one, interest rates on mortgages have started to ease up, making it a little cheaper to borrow. Then there's demographics. The population keeps growing, and all those people need a place to live, right? That's constant underlying demand. You've also got continued interest from foreign buyers. And this is a big one, developers seem to be playing it smart, maybe slowing down construction just enough to avoid flooding the market with too much supply. It's a really complex mix of things keeping prices afloat.
So what you end up with is this fascinating tug of war. You've got these powerful growth factors, population growth, foreign demand, lower borrowing costs, all pulling prices up. But then on the other side of the rope, you have the cooling factors, slowing sales, cautious developers, pulling prices down. And right now, it seems like those two sides are in a near-perfect stalemate. And that's why we're seeing this market just stuck in neutral.
And really, that brings us right back to where we started. The big picture of Israel's housing market today is that it's a market full of contradictions. The short-term numbers, the sales figures, they scream slowdown. But the long-term fundamentals, strong demand and a carefully managed supply, are keeping prices incredibly resilient.
Which, of course, leaves us with that one final nagging question. Is this strange equilibrium we're seeing just a temporary pause? You know, the quiet before the market finally picks a direction and either surges up or trends down? Or are we actually witnessing a fundamental pivot, a shift to a new normal for Israeli real estate, one that's more stable, maybe, but also much slower moving? For now, only time is going to tell.